Canada has qualified for Rugby World Cup 2019. The November test window has come to a close, and today we're building pathways from university to the pros. The ARN podcast, episode 4. Here we go. So I said last week that we'd have a poll to kind of decide on a name for this thing, but we decided to put that off slightly. We're going to be taking a bit of a break to kind of get ready for the coming storm that is 2019. So there might be, one more episode on the way, and then we'll fire it up again in the first week of January. We'll get some guests lined up in advance so we can get to a more consistent schedule. The test window is now behind us. Uruguay with an historic win over Romania, 27-20, a crazy end to that game. If you can find the last couple minutes online, do check that out. Argentina came up short against Scotland. Not the most exciting game ever played, and the Pumas, I don't think, will be overly satisfied with that result. Certainly could have got a win. Brazil was in Argentina to play a couple provincial sides over the past few days. They lost very close games to Tucumán and Salta. Maybe a little disappointing, but some younger guys got experience in new positions, so certainly a worthwhile exercise for them. And the winning streak is over for the Eagles. They lost to Ireland in Dublin. Not really a surprise, to be expected, but they played well, hung in for about 50 minutes. Here's Ireland coach Joe Schmidt's reaction to the game.
There's certainly some lads who know they've been in a game, but I felt when we got the game to a certain tempo, it did allow us to find a bit of space, and we didn't always capitalise on it, which was frustrating, particularly in the first half. But then the second half, I thought we capitalised on a few kind of open running opportunities, and that allowed us to accumulate what we did on the scoreboard. We were really conscious that they would be tough going. You don't beat Scotland and not have something in the locker, and you don't beat Samoa and not have something in the locker. So we knew it was going to be tough.
Irish fans are feeling a bit down this week after Joe announced that he would be stepping away from rugby to spend more time with his family. Andy Farrell taking over the head coach role after the World Cup. A lot of people thought Schmidt would jump to the All Blacks, but it seems like that's not going to happen now. So maybe a few New Zealanders sharing the Irish grief right now. A quick mention to Fiji, who upset France in Paris, no less. I thought they were outstanding, and the TMO was not. 2 tries called back. The first, in my opinion, a dreadful call. A very debatable offside against Fiji. A wonderful try scored. The referee's initial reaction was play on, and the TMO steps in with something so pedantic. It was very, very frustrating. Match officials all over the world were left scratching their heads after some of the calls we've seen over the past 3 weeks. Hopefully they can talk about this ahead of the World Cup, get this sorted out. I digress a bit. Canada defeated Hong Kong. Book your flights. Grab your tickets if you can get any. Canada are headed to Rugby World Cup 2019 in Japan. Not the best performance in the first half. Really, left it a bit stressful. A lot of possession territory given to Hong Kong, but they picked it up in the second half, got the job done. So congratulations to them. A richly deserved reward and very relieving one. And I guess that extra $20 that Rugby Canada roped in from everyone and their dog paid off in the end. Here's Phil Mack.
Oh, I just over the moon. Coming into this, we knew it was going to be tough, and we knew each game was going to be a different test, but all the support from home and the boys just digging in and getting all the work done this tour in the last year building up to this is awesome. And, a super scrappy game, but, I'm just so happy to get away with the win. Honestly, we were just wanted to get here and we wanted to play straight away after that last game. Once the review was done, we just wanted to get into this World Cup, and, we had a goal in mind. Credit to the coaching staff. They came in and we were in a pretty bad spot once Kingsley took over, and he's really upskilled us all, and he's put us in a position now where we get to go to a World Cup. So that goal is done. Now the hard work really starts, and we got to go to the World Cup and perform.
And on the other side of things, you have to feel a bit bad for both Hong Kong and Germany, who really put up quite a fight in the repechage competition. I thought both sides were very competitive. Certainly there are compelling arguments for a 24-team World Cup, or certainly some kind of expansion. Here's Hong Kong captain James Cunningham.
Oh, just a bit frustrated, to be honest with you. You know, we had the opportunities once again, just like the Germany game, and we just didn't take our opportunities, and Canada did. You know, it's a bit disappointing now. We didn't stick to our game plan, which we went out with. And I think we suffered because of that, which is really disappointing. We lost little battles on the field, and that's why I think we didn't get the win.
So there's a lot to talk about, and let's start by bringing in our very own Paul Tate, joining us now from some insane asylum down in Brazil. All right, Paul, we'll start where we finished last week. You called it Canada comfortable winners over Hong Kong to earn their spot at Rugby World Cup 2019. So they go into Pool B. We're not really going to worry about New Zealand or South Africa. If we decide that Canada's goal is to come third in the pool, and I think we came to that conclusion last week, it effectively becomes a 3-team mini competition within the pool. Namibia, we've clearly defined as a winnable game, although they did get a win over Portugal on the weekend. So Canada plays Namibia last. So that really means the key game comes first for Canada when they play Italy. Now, we discussed it last week. Do you still think that Canada can beat the Azzurri next year?
I do. I watched all of Italy's matches this month, and they are not looking good, are they? They have a few injured names, but realistically, they should be not losing by over 60 points against the All Blacks. Australia were awful, and Italy were even worse. Georgia were off their game, so that helped Italy. But I mean, that was a genuine, evenly fought match. So, I would compare the Georgia-Italy match to something along the lines in terms of competitiveness to something like a Fiji versus Japan kind of match, very even contest. So that's great news for Canadian rugby. I think that Canada got through their World Cup repertoire very well. I was surprised with some of the selections, but I mean, the coach can only be credited for the results. Tremendous effort. Definitely can beat the Italians, but it's going to involve a tremendous effort. Of course, they're going to have to leave no stone unturned for that one. I think that Canada has probably the back row advantage over the Italians. Pretty even in terms of some of the finishers, but I'd say DTH is the best finisher of Canada or Italy. And let's see how they go in getting the midfield, because I think Italy, their big weapon will be their midfield against Canadians. So hopefully Canada's able to address that.
So for America's teams now into the World Cup, obviously this is great for the Americas. We've touched on the possibility of extending the World Cup. Obviously, I think everybody's, most people anyways, on the tier 2 side of things are very pro expansion to 24 teams and so on. But, who's the next team from the Americas that will make that jump to become a World Cup team? Is it Brazil or Chile? Are they getting closer to making that jump?
Yeah, I think they both are realistically now. Brazil is in a favored position. Brazil probably even match for Kenya, possibly slightly better. So that's a pretty good indication that they have the means, because if we're going to go to 24, what are we going to do? Who are the teams going to be? World Rugby are pretty clear. They're not on record in saying this, but they're pretty clear that it doesn't matter about the results that Africa teams get outside of South Africa, of course, in the World Cup. They're going to get their spot regardless for the next tournament. And so it's really hard to actually identify the best way of going about it, because I could honestly name 24 teams who could be at the World Cup in Japan next year. Let's imagine Spain or Romania had the problems they had, then we wouldn't be naming 4 additional sides. We're naming just 2 of them. So it's a bit hard, because Hong Kong and Germany were both very good against Canada and Kenya. So it's very exciting times, I think, for Tier 2 and beyond.
In speaking to Josh Reeves in one of our earlier shows, he mentioned that Brazil was really gunning for, to get another Canada scalp in the ARC. So I'm interested actually to see, maybe the next World Cup cycle if they can even push Uruguay and Canada for a spot. But we'll jump away from that for just a second. The top team from the Americas, obviously right now, the U.S. Eagles. They lost to Ireland 57-14. A reasonably close game until Big Joe Taufete'e went off early in the second half. Ireland were probably always going to win that. Is the scoreline at all disappointing, or is it a fair indication of where the USA stands right now, do you think?
I don't think it's disappointing at all. Let's compare this match to a comparative fixture. And to do that, I would go back to Rugby World Cup 2015, the game against South Africa in London, and the United States couldn't score a try in the match. They were held pointless. In fact, against Ireland in comparison, they had 2 tries early on, and realistically at halftime they were looking pretty good. 10 points behind. Obviously, there's a gulf between the teams. There's no denying that. But it's utterly clear to me how much they have progressed. And for that match in particular against South Africa, just finding the players for the game, and because you had Japan a few days later, and it was a choice of sacrificing one or the other. And they came through it in the end much better against Ireland than was the case from the World Cup, because against South Africa, they were not good at all. Defensively weak, and South Africa were just able to keep them at bay throughout the match. Ireland, though, I mean, look at the try that Big Joe got against Ireland. I mean, that's tremendous. They got a penalty try as well. So yeah, I think it was a great effort.
And we'll talk more in detail about the ARC, obviously, as it comes closer. But the USA has now won it twice in a row. We have to assume that they won't be with, maybe some of the stars like Big Joe and McGinty and Lasike. What's your early assessment? Do they have the depth to win it again in 2019?
I think they do. Yes, I think it's going to be pretty open this time around, because you're going to have, I assume you're going to have release issues even with Major League Rugby players. I mean, Uruguayans, for example, they're on record as being affected. The guys who have joined the league are not going to be playing all of the matches, maybe only 1 or 2, in fact. So, I mean, looking at it from this perspective, that's pretty good news for Chile and for Brazil, because they are going to have few players from abroad involved for them. And so that's going to probably level out the playing field quite a bit, I would suggest. But I think the United States do have the means of going into this tournament and winning it. I would put them as favorites, because I also think that the Argentina 15 are going to be diluted yet again. I think that 2018 was pretty clear that the player management issues need to be sorted out better. The World Cup's coming up now, so you're going to have more Super Rugby opportunities for Argentina 15 players than was the case in this year and previous editions of the tournament. So I would still suggest the United States are favorites, but a lot could happen. It's going to be good to watch.
Of course, on the weekend, we saw Uruguay against Romania, the last gasp win for Los Teros. Agustin Ormachia coming on as a replacement, getting the intercept try, the second intercept try in the match. Andres Villaseca getting one earlier in the game. Was this a lucky win, do you think? What do you make of their performance in that one?
Fortune favors the brave, as they say. It definitely applies to Uruguay in this match, but also stupidity is an important part of rugby too. We saw France blow a match against South Africa because of that in November. Romania, I mean, what was it, 2 or 3 minutes there at the end with the ball, and then they carelessly, threw it, and along comes Agustin Ormachia and gets the pass. So, yeah, I mean, you can only blame both Romania for doing that, but also credit Uruguay for getting it the win. I mean, they came out of nowhere, and I mean, even a draw against Romania, even though Romania have their own issues and they're not necessarily at full strength, but getting that result was tremendous. It's the first time Uruguay's beaten them. A draw was only going to be the second draw between the teams. They've never came away with anything other than a loss in Romania. So tremendous. I thought Andres Villaseca, his intercept was for me the talking point, because how on earth is this guy able to keep doing this? I mean, he got multiple intercepts against Canada to get the World Cup qualifying spot. He's got intercepts, South America, Six Nations tournament too. I mean, this is just phenomenal. I can't think of another player with this ability. He obviously he can read the play really, really well, and I think teams are going to have to keep an eye on this for the World Cup and so forth.
Yeah, I thought he was probably Uruguay's strongest player over their November campaign. Looking at them now, as you say, they're going to lose some of those guys like Vilaseca, like Echeverria and Rodrigo Silva, etc. Some of these senior guys, they won't have them for the entire ARC. So they have an opportunity to make, to take a look at some other players. What are some deficiencies, do you think, or do you see with them right now where they can maybe take some chances with selection and try and add something to their team before the World Cup?
We pretty much know who the guys are who are going to be playing against Fiji, Georgia, the 2 games for Uruguay at the World Cup. So what we've got to realistically do is identify who are the other guys going to be, who are the support players, who can come along. So, I mean, I would go back to the Uruguay 15 results this year and get a pretty good idea from that based on who the guys are going to be, I think, to look out for in the America's Rugby Championship. So maybe it's a bit too early to name anybody. But, I mean, having said that, there are some guys, obviously, who are standouts ahead of the rest, like fly half Andres de Leon, I would name as a guy that should be a prominent in the America's Rugby Championship. Maybe Federico Favaro. Where are you going to play him? Is he going to be winger? Is he going to be fullback? Very good in either position. So those 2 are probably the backs I would nominate. Leandro Segredo as a flanker. Also, what are Uruguay going to do in terms of scrum half? They're going to take 3 or only 2? What's their policy? So if you're going to take 3, I think Tomas Inciarte is the name I would throw in the hat to look out for too.
Yeah, I'm particularly interested in Favaro on the wing. I think maybe they could use a little bit more explosive speed, and certainly he's a very creative player out there. I really enjoy watching him play. Brazil just finished a little 2-match tour of Argentina. They played provincial sides Tucumán and Salta. They lost both of them 34-31 to Tucumán, and just last night, they lost to Salta 30-29. Is it disappointing to see them losing to these provincial sides after relatively competing against the Maori All Blacks?
Oh, definitely. I mean, you go to win, and Brazil have got results this year, last year, that they've been tremendous, hugely impressive in America's Rugby Championship. Getting a win over Belgium has just been nothing short of extraordinary from them. So, I mean, losing to Argentine provinces, yeah, it's definitely disappointing. But, I mean, let's be realistic. Let's look at Brazil now and Brazil from the past. Getting results, losing within a score like they have against Tucumán and Salta, that is not anything to be concerned about. In fact, compared to past sides, this Brazilian side is obviously much better. It tells you also that when they go back, maybe in a year, maybe in 2 years, you'd probably give them the favorites tag.
So them, they're obviously not playing in the World Cup. Looking ahead at the ARC, do you think they pick some younger guys for that? Are they going to kind of expand their horizon a bit for the ARC, or are they just kind of try and keep the status quo and try and get some results?
No, keep the status quo, definitely. I think that's what they'll be trying to do. Interesting to see who's going to be the 10. I think Reeves will be unavailable most likely, maybe get 1 or 2 matches, but they're going to have to look there. Do they play Mosé Stoop there? What do they do? There was somebody new, so that's going to be interesting. But generally, I expect the team to be basically similar to what we've seen throughout this year. I mean, you can probably look at 10 or so names who have been holding down their positions, and the other guys have played most but not all of the matches. You got a really settled side, and they're going to be a hard team to beat for everybody.
And of course, on the weekend, we saw Argentina wrap up the test contingent of their tour. Of course, they've got 1 game left against the Barbarians coming up. But looking at that game against Scotland, maybe not ideal conditions, but it wasn't really terrible. They lose by 5 points. There wasn't really a lot in their performance. Looking at it from my perspective, they really struggled to get something going offensively. Is this pretty much the same thing that we've seen throughout. Did we learn anything new from that performance against Scotland?
We learned that goal kicking is vital. I mean, you can't be listed as one of the top 3 in the world by a number of people and be kicking at 50% against Scotland. That's just, you can't do that. So Nico Sanchez was disappointing. But I mean, Boffelli also missed a regulation kick for him. It was long distance, but it's the same kicks he's been getting over in Rugby Championship, for instance. I mean, Argentina were without, let's see, Marcus Crema not there. So Rodrigo Bruni got a start. I think he did well. And that was realistically the first test match under Ledesma to have a back row, which is a back row, not a lock playing out of position. So that was interesting. It's gonna, it gives them more bonuses because I look at who they could call in to boost the World Cup roster, and there's only Facundo Issa for either second row or Flanca, who has not played under Ledesma already this year. The other guys, obviously, Mariano Galaz. I can't get anybody else. So you're going to be talking about Jaguars only, plus those 2 names for World Cup selection. So he did well in this match. I also thought that the scrum was better overall. The defense was pretty much was tremendously in comparison to how they did against France. But compared to Ireland, it was pretty much the same as that. I thought the trial was unfortunate. It was a lapse. Shouldn't realistically have happened, but well done to Scotland for spotting it as they did. But I think let's compare this match to the previous one, which was June, Horkad's final match. And yeah, I mean, how poor were Argentina on that day? Just absolutely shocking. And they got a loss by 5 points against Scotland this weekend. I mean, goal kicking on target, they would have won the match. So I mean, let's not be so harsh on how they did. In 10 months. The Scotland team we saw this month in November is basically what we're going to see in the World Cup. It's realistically hard to identify additional names that can boost it. Argentina's different in that regard.
So looking ahead this weekend, the Barbarians to wrap things up. But, this all of a sudden, as you mentioned, the Jaguares, this weekend's match takes on kind of a different complexion than what we're used to seeing with the Barbarians. Rassi Erasmus has picked 13 of his Springbok players. He's obviously having a look at them. And on the other side, Argentina are basically going to be using this match to test fringe players like Joaquin Diaz-Bonilla at number 10, looking for a spot on the Jaguares and also looking ahead to the World Cup. So is that what we're expecting to see? Kind of almost a trial match this weekend?
Oh, yes. I mean, Ledesma says he's not going to influence Jaguares in any way. He's saying it's over to Quesada to do that as he wishes, to play who he wishes, and so forth. But I don't buy into that so much because they've got a World Cup coming up. This is the final match of the year. They have a lot of things to look over because realistically, Ledesma, in his own mind, he knows who he's going to be taking to the World Cup already. He's just having to test out specific players in specific positions because Argentina is going to have a challenging pool to get through. Realistically, in the World Cup, he's going to be playing reserves against Tonga. I mean, to be able to do that, you've going to have a very good lineup. I mean, I envision this team that we're going to see is going to be roughly 10 changes from what we had against Scotland. It's not the best side, of course, but this is a lineup very much to look forward to the World Cup, but also, like you mentioned, Super Rugby. How are they going to manage Super Rugby next year? I mean, you had Agustin Carevi playing, starting Super Rugby all season, starting all the test matches. I mean, at the same time as that, we're getting teams from England starting to decrease the number of internationals and club matches each player plays. And they're trying to get the magic number. They're trying to get it towards 25. I mean, Ireland is already there. New Zealand is already there. So, I mean, is Argentina going to look at that way too? Because there's no doubt about it. The players this year, players against Scotland, for instance, were the same guys who've been there all year. I would put the Barbarians as favourites to win it, definitely.
Juan Manuel Leguizamon starting for the Barbarians at number 8. It sounds like he's considering or very close to retirement. Is this the last time we're going to be seeing him on the international stage?
International stage, I think it is. I don't think we'll see him again, but I do think he'll be there playing for Jaguares. And that's going to be a combination of the needs of the team and just having general cover, because, like I say, I do not envision we're going to see the same players playing all season again. You've got him, you've got Senatore, who was dropped, you've got Gonzalez Iglesias, who was dropped. I mean, these guys were dropped, but they're going to be needed for Super Rugby. You cannot realistically get through the 16 matches plus potential playoffs, then go to the international stage. I mean, these guys are going to be vital in that respect. I wouldn't say that they're not going to be recalled for the World Cup. If there's an injury, you never know.
And last thing before we call is the World Rugby Awards were this past weekend in Monte Carlo. I'm never a huge fan of award kind of banquet things, but I always figure if you're going to do them, you might as well do them right. It's interesting when they nominate players of the year, they always they have the nominations. They release like a list of 3 or 4 players, whatever. But they don't really do it for teams, and I kind of feel like they let down the Eagles a little bit by not calling them a nominee for Team of the Year, even though everybody knew Ireland was going to win. They didn't even give really a mention at all to the Eagles, which I thought was disappointing. And I think the other disappointing thing for me, and I think pretty much unanimous here, is that Baptiste Delguy, another one, completely overlooked for Breakthrough Player of the Year. I mean, is this a bit of a snub for the Americas at this, obviously Perry Baker winning, but I think that's, looking at his selection, almost a popularity thing. But, are the Americas getting a snub here from World Rugby?
Definitely, yes. Delguy not nominated, just absolute nonsense. They nominated Jordan Lamer from Ireland. We all know how good the guy is. Anyone who's watched knows. But have we seen him for Ireland being tremendous prior to his nomination? Have we? How many tries did he score? The answer is 0. So his nomination just doesn't make sense, because Ireland basically seem to have benefited from being as good as they are this year, and World Rugby thinking, maybe we need an Irish player to be nominated for the award. I mean, I just don't see how you can nominate a player such as that when he doesn't have a try or a start for prior to nomination. And we're talking about World Rugby recognizing the finest performances. When you have rookie players scoring 4 or more tries against the best opposition in the world, and they don't get nominated, that's insane. So that's I would suggest a very subjective system. It's unfortunate, but that's the way it is.
We made it through the November tests somehow. One last weekend to enjoy with the just the Barbarians match. Looking back over it all, thoughts? Are you pleased with how it all went?
For the United States, very much. For Uruguay, I would add, I'm also very happy, apart from the Fiji match. But we did learn, based on Fiji-France, among other things, that this is not a Tier 2 side, it's a Tier 1 side. The Fiji men are massive. And it's good that the result came now and not at the World Cup, because now Uruguay are going to have the time to sort it out. So that's good for them. Argentina, no wins, but let's not look too much into that, because they were up against really well-prepared sides, and they've got the same players playing too tired and so forth. So with Argentina, I'm not so concerned as I would be had this been a year ago. In terms of Canada, now that's where I'm really happy. I mean, mission accomplished. And I'm looking forward to what they can get done in the immediate future in the America's Rugby Championship. I think hopefully we're going to see Canada rising in the rankings again. I mean, realistically, where do you think that they're ranked compared to the world's top 20?
They're probably right around there. That's probably fairly accurate. At their best, maybe a little bit higher, but we haven't really seen them at their best aside from maybe that one game against Germany. So I would say that's probably about accurate.
I mean, I thought Canada this month, they were better than Tonga this month. So I would put Canada, or maybe Uruguay level, maybe slightly above them, to be honest.
Yeah, it's an interesting debate, and I guess we're going to find out soon enough. Certainly next year, 2019 Japan. Canada will have their day in the sun, their opportunity to beat Italy to earn that qualification spot. Wouldn't that be something, looking at USA, their pool, how difficult that is as well. It looks like it's going to be an exciting year for rugby. And we're almost there. We're just a month away from 2019 now.
Bring it on. It's going to be awesome.
Bring it on. Indeed, it's going to be complete chaos. The ARC, Major League Rugby, the World 7 Series, all on the go. You can find Paul, by the way, on Twitter at Argentina_2027. Speaking of the 7 Series, both the men's and women's circuits are in Dubai this weekend. Personally, I'd like to see more of that where everyone is in the same place. At the very least, we need to see the women's circuit expanded to match the men on 10 tournaments throughout the season. Canada's women's 15s team wrapped up their 4-match tour this week. Both tough matches. They beat Wales on Saturday. It was very close until the final quarter when they just pulled away at the end. And then they played Scotland on Tuesday, and it was the first time they've played them since the 2010 World Cup. Lots of new players getting a run out there. Canada were heavy favorites, but the Scots came very close to upsetting them, or at least tying them. Just a couple mistakes in the first half. Scotland scored 2 tries and then got a bit of belief and made for a really nervous ending in that one. Scotland just missing a penalty that would have tied the game really from right in front of the stick. So Canada getting maybe a little bit lucky there. So Canada held off in the end. Here's Captain Laura Russell.
It was a great game against Scotland today. We battled hard and we knew we were going to get a fight, and that's what we were in. But we opened it up in a few places, and there's just some areas we need to work on to finish better. Our new players were great. They picked up and they did everything they could to learn and grow with the program, and they fit in like a glove, and we're really excited for what the future has to bring in Rugby Canada. I'm looking forward to where we're going to go. I mean, we've got a young and talented, and we have a lot of vets back, and it's going to be an exciting road in the next couple of years. We have lots of things coming up, and this is just a starting point for us, so we've got a good road ahead of us.
And I'm interested to see what they have ahead of them as well. Nothing has been confirmed yet, but World Rugby is apparently looking to give them a regular test schedule like the men have right now, so hopefully that is the case. And also, over this past weekend, the UBC Thunderbirds emerged victorious from the Canadian University Men's Championship. Back-to-back titles for the T-Birds. You know, we're starting to see the fruits of some of the collegiate programs in the USA. Some players jumping from college rugby up to Major League Rugby. Hopefully that is going to be the case now in Canada, now that we have a team. Here to talk about the win and about that ladder is someone uniquely qualified to do so. UBC head coach Curry Hitchborn joins us now from the West Coast. Curry, thanks for joining us. A busy couple weeks for you. You got married, and now you've won a national championship. Are you ready to slide back into everyday life just yet?
I am, but coaching rugby out here and the amount of teams that I coach, my everyday life is being on the field somewhere doing something.
It's never a dull moment for you. So the Thunderbirds defeating Queen's Gales 21-10 in the final to win a second consecutive men's university national championship. Queens were actually up 7-3 at halftime. Was there any doubt in your mind your team would pull through in that second half?
A really difficult question. We knew nothing about Queens going into it outside of some of the athletes they'd had. A lot of those kids come from really excellent programs. And then you simply look at the record Dave Butcher had amassed, 22-0 heading into this. There's a lot of hearsay around, who has the better programs and, which province is the best. And I think that Queens came out and proved, fairly emphatically that you don't need to leave your province and you don't need to leave your own backyard to play really high level rugby. They were full value. We didn't touch the ball in the first 30, but that's happened to us before time and time again. When we played the University of British Columbia Old Boy Ravens earlier this year, featuring a bunch of our grads and some very, very top players, also very well coached. We played defense for 32 minutes and wound up winning that one. So we'd been in that situation before. Our guys had recognized that Queens did not look like they'd been under that form of sustained pressure for that long, probably ever in their season. And for us, we do a lot of that. So were there nerves? There's always nerves, man. Was there any doubt? Well, you never want to doubt the guys on the field. It's just a game. It could have gone either way, but we controlled what we could control very well. We didn't let the lack of possession get to us, and we made some fairly intelligent decisions just as we started to turn on, which is around the probably 38th minute, close to the 40th minute. The games were 60 minutes long, so I would have liked to definitely play a full game there to get a full level of where we're at, especially with the opportunity to see that many athletes who hopefully play test rugby one day on display.
Looking at that, obviously you're seeing teams, as you said, that you've never seen before.
Wow.
What was your overall impression of the standard of play as a whole for the tournament? Did you feel it was better than a year ago? Did any of the results surprise you at all?
we have the limited ability to actually know what we're going against. I mean, we can base things on the relative strength of competitions. And I think that's really what the question is it's not the teams per se. Every single one of those teams brought their best and their brightest, and they deserve to be there. You could look around there and you could see where some of those guys are really, really going places as long as they stick with it. It's just a matter of finding that right system. Was the gameplay better? It was certainly different. You know, I mean, we opened up last year's tournament against a remarkably physical Concordia side. Speaking of John Lavery before the tournament, this year, you know, we were talking about there was a large amount of trepidation on our part having to face that buzzsaw again. This year, I found them to be less physical, but a much better rugby team, if that makes sense. They had way better structure than they had the previous year. There was way cleaner lines of communication. You could tell that everybody knew where they needed to be. The previous year, we were hanging on for dear life, and the score was not reflective. The Guelph team, certainly not as strong as last year's, but again, I think, you know, a lot of people get carried away with the strength of teams in university rugby. You know, people will say things like, UVic lost to Queens and things like that. We only have these guys for 4 or 5 years, and you're only as good as you recruit. And, you know, you can recruit a ready-made rugby player, but how that person fits into a system, where they come back from, that leads a lot into it. You know, we brought a team of 26, and I would say that, you know, this is definitely one of our more eclectic groups we've had as opposed to years gone by. Simply looking at those results, I think isn't the best marker per se on the relative strength of a team. It just, again, I think comes down to the systems in which we're currently playing in. Obviously very surprised to see UVic lose to Queens. But like I said, Queens was an excellent rugby team. Queens was very, very good. And I think they came out, a lot of mistakes both ways. You know, I watched that entire game, actually, UVic and Queens, and it was plain to see that nerves were a factor. I've not seen Queens play, or UVic, I've not seen UVic play like that in a number of years, and I think they were shocked by what Queens had brought to the table. You know, having said that, UVic did an excellent job of rounding that corner and putting on an excellent performance against a very good Concordia side. Was I surprised by the results? Yeah. You just don't know what you're going to expect going in. So you just have to take it a game at a time, and you have to just be aware of what you can do. I think we watched probably 10 to 15 minutes of footage on Queens. You can't focus on that. You have to focus on what you can control based on what you have.
You mentioned UVic's loss to Queens. Obviously, you see UVic a lot. They're your big rivals, I guess, for time immemorial. For a long time, it was UVic who were kind of on top of the world, so to speak, and now it seems to be very much in UBC's favor. So, I mean, what's the secret? Why is UBC churning out all these winners suddenly?
Let's add a ton of salt to that one. We rate our relative strength against UVic through an annual competition known as the Whiteman Boot. It's an incredibly useful game series that's highlighted numerous current and past UBC and UVic alumnus throughout the years. It's an aggregate total. So we've had the hot hand for coming into our 6th year. This is my first year as a head coach, solo head coach. UVic had won the Whiteman Boot for 13 years in a row. So while we're certainly coming around that corner, we're almost at halfway with the legacy that they've created and, you know, the level of control they've had over our competition. A large part of why I believe UVic has been so strong in the past has certainly been the idea that in order to play national level rugby, you have to move to Vancouver Island. There is a level of understanding now amongst people in key development areas within our NSO that are beginning to recognize fully the value of not only having a degree, but being in a system in which you do get, you know, proper weightlifting, proper training, I'd say proper coaching, but I just put cones out. We're largely player-led. And I think that has certainly helped towards it. Look at some of the guys we've had gone past in the last couple of years: Theo Souter, Andrew Coe, Ben Lesage, Brock Stoller, Nakai Penny. I mean, we've pushed a lot out there, and that's not even going through the age grade representation as well. We've done fairly well on that marker also. I think it's just, to be completely frank with you, Brian, I think it's just the current form. You know, Doug Tate, Rick Fairley do an excellent job out there. They've got a lot of support. from their community. They got a lot of support from their local rugby clubs as well. And it shows. When I do recruitment, I'm very cognizant of the fact that there is a deep-seated loyalty to that island. And the people that went through those systems over there, be it the northern part of the island or the southern part of the island, certainly feel a very, very, very important connection to not only representing their hometown on an academic level, but representing their hometown and rugby community on the field as well. And UVic does a really good job of putting that out. UBC is a completely different animal, Brian. I mean, there's something like 80,000 people out there. You can go to elementary school at UBC, high school, attend university. You could have been born out there, man. It's its own city. Harnessing that, bringing that level of infrastructure, that level of high volume interdisciplinary studies and athletics to the fore in a program that's often not a program, but a sport that's often overlooked in this country is certainly very, very challenging. But once you get it right, you're off to the races. It's just a simple issue of paying attention to what you've got in front of you, what you have around you, and most importantly, who's in behind that, pushing it to move forward. We're seeing more and more kids put their hands up, for self-selection for universities. We're seeing more and more kids engage in conversations about the monetization of rugby before it becomes youth sport, and hopefully it does become youth sport one day. We're seeing a lot of parents ask very considered questions, which are academic-based first. And university is not for everybody. We're not going to get them all any more than I want them all, right? Like I probably turn 10 to 15 kids away a year because they want to come to UBC just to play rugby. If you don't want to go to school at UBC, don't even apply. If you want to come just to play rugby, don't apply at all. You can't get by like that. So different approaches. Long story short, UVic's time will come. They're by no means out. They're by no means, and they usually turn on in the second half. So anytime we can get a W off those guys is a big moment for us.
A lot to digest in there. I want to just touch on one of those points to start. I had the privilege to do commentary for the women's U Sports finals out in Wolfville, Nova Scotia. Watching that up close, seeing not only the amount of work that goes into the logistics, all the behind the scenes stuff, but also the recognition that it gets from Rugby Canada. Sandro Fiorino was there. All the national selectors were there in person. We've already seen the significant impact that the women's tournament has had on that national program. Can this men's tournament find a similar place in the men's competition pathway? And does it require U Sports status to get there?
It absolutely has to get to that stage. It must. We're so far past the point of, is this something we should be doing? Is there value to this? I could talk ad nauseum about the benefits of this level of competition. Whether it has U Sport designation or not, well, if it's got U Sport designation, then you move out of a privately funded model, and it certainly levels the playing field. Some schools, ourselves included, are able to incentivize athletes that, exhibit financial need or get in on academic merits as well. And it's such an important avenue to put those people on display, because more often than not, we get really carried away with, who's running the program or, where are they located? And we really look beyond the people that are actually playing the sport, which are those guys on the field day in, day out. I strongly believe that if we don't carry on with this and we rely on what we've been doing, we've no one to blame but ourselves should repeat poor performances occur. It's such obvious low-hanging fruit, and then the trickle-down effect that has into secondary or high schools is enormous. I mean, you've got kids out there that just want to be playing the sport they love, and they want to go to school. Some kids, I can't speak for all of them, and to be able to put them in a position where they can get evaluated, you're saving a lot of people travel money, putting them in a position where they can compete, they can now rate themselves against their peers, and then getting all of us university coaches in the same area, that same arena of conflict, to be in a position in which we can share ideas, talk, and most importantly, just weigh ourselves against our peers. I don't get a lot of coach development in this country, and a lot of us don't. So to go out there and see what the other guy is doing and talk and the rest of it, it's so important on so many different levels. If we were to turn this into a league structure, I firmly believe a number of things would change. Number one, which I believe is the most important issue in Rugby Canada right now, is referee development. So we would get better referees, not saying the referees we have are garbage, but we would get more engagement. We'd see more people put their hands up, which means more referees and a wider base for our officials in their development roles to draw from. The other incentive would certainly be that we're all playing by the same rules. We're all under the same umbrella. And I think that a streamlined, cohesive league structure supported by the universities is of the utmost importance. I can't speak enough about it. I'm not denigrating any form of competition that I currently compete in, but this has a completely different appeal to it for the people moving through. It's, I hate to say it, but rugby isn't like it used to be when I was going through high school or when I was coming back from university after I promptly dropped out of it and was able to slap on the boots, and do my thing. And we rely heavily on our clubs. We rely heavily on our high schools. We rely heavily on our regional development centers, and we rely heavily on, any number of other outlets to be able to take those kids and the best and brightest of those kids, because everybody develops at a later age, and put them in an area in which they can compete against their peers and they can be in those really organized systems. You're only going to see benefit. There's not a single detriment I can see to any of this, outside of the fact that it takes a ton of money, and money, as you know, doesn't grow on trees.
Right. And I mean, you've kind of already touched upon this, but, once upon a time, Canada had the CCSD, or the Pacific Pride program. You've already mentioned, some of your players, Ben Lesage and Theo Sauter, not only started, but played key roles for Canada in the repechage. And you've had, Stoller, and you've had Jordan Sandover Best getting capped this year. Andrew Coe, obviously, with the Sevens, headed to Dubai this weekend. Is it kind of imperative that Rugby Canada finds a greater connection with these university programs and uses them as kind of, almost like Pacific Pride programs across the country as informal centers for regional development?
Rugby Canada lately has certainly recognized the added benefit. It's cost share. I mean, think about how much money gets saved. You don't have to house these extra guys. You don't have to give them carding. You don't have to pay for their transportation to and from. The issue has always been one of trust, and I completely understand that. You work for an NSO, you have to be conscious at all times of your employment status. You have to be conscious of at all times, the shifting, the way those government organizations shift. I mean, there's so much added pressure up there. Those guys have to do so many things that if somebody else is going to help shoulder that load, someone else is going to help ease that burden, as long as it's towards a common goal, I mean, you'd be cutting your nose off to spite your face to not recognize it. Rugby Canada's engagement on this piece, you get guys like Paul Henry Van Thiel, you get Nathan Abdelnour, you've got the Canadian Rugby Foundation, which are just like Mark Wyatt, Mike Holmes. I'm missing way more, but those are names that come to mind because they're in that immediate sense, supporting this tournament alongside Rugby Canada. In a perfect world, Brian, we have a university league with a university championship, and, which I think is on equal, if not more important footing, because, you're not going to get all these kids into these university systems, is the Pacific Pride, the CCSD. Getting rid of that was pure madness. I truly well and hope that is coming back. And I can tell you right now, from a UBC standpoint, if we can help aid that in any way, shape, or form, our hands are up, man. We are gunning for that. Because you're going to get that guy who doesn't want to go to university. University's not for everybody. A lot of guys choose a different career path. A lot of guys choose a different school path or career path later in life. By having the CCSD in place, we're getting everything we can. It's like, you live on the East Coast, you wouldn't ever drop a net in fish if you had a bunch of holes in it, would you? We gotta sew those holes up, and we've got to tighten her. And we've got to move forward, with that common goal, and we're doing that. And these things take time and money, but I believe right now, at this current state of affairs with rugby in this country, thank Christ we qualified for the Rugby World Cup. Look at our women's program. I mean, that game against Scotland, I don't know if you saw that. Like, we're doing some great things, but the hardest thing to do is do consistently great things, even consistently good things, And I'd take complete instead of perfect any day of the week. And I think we're building towards being complete. I well and truly do.
We've seen kind of Kingsley Jones and the senior men's staff kind of move away from looking at the CDI Premier League and pretty much club rugby as a whole. They don't really look at club rugby anymore. Can you give us an idea of what the difference is for your team in an average week during the season versus an average club side as far as preparation and all the kinds of things that they go through? Why it's advantageous, the university program and I guess specifically UBC.
If you look at what UBC brings to the table, I can only speak to UBC. I've not been a part of any other university programs. But what UBC supplies our athletes with is, the constant ability to test themselves, not just on a field, which is very important because, without that, I wouldn't have a JOB, but they're in a constant point in which they have to compete in a classroom, they have to compete in a gym, and they have to compete during a training. At a rugby club, I cut my teeth coaching club rugby. It's where I got started. I started as a men's third division coach at Capilano Rugby Club as an assistant. I worked my way up to head coach of men's third division. And the following year, I was brought on to be the men's first division head coach. And I was Tom Larish's forwards coach the year we got relegated. And in the same year came back and won a Roundsfell Cup. Club rugby is incredibly important. The issue is that it's not what it used to be, and that is due to a lack of engagement from many, many different areas. We've noticed a massive drop-off of kids playing age-grade club rugby, and a lot of guys that graduate from universities simply put don't go back. I believe, speaking from a UBC standpoint, is that the UBC motto, excel, engage, inspire, those aren't just three really easy words, and our personal motto is, great rugby, great education. Those aren't just fun buzzwords to say. You are in a position in which you have to excel. You're being constantly engaged, negatively or positively, and the level of success these guys can encounter, be it in a classroom, in their community, through job placement, through any number of things. It's easy to garner that level of inspiration. Couple that with the fact that we do play really good rugby, and you come out the back end with a great education, a wide alumni base, able to put you in places where you can potentially get interviews for jobs, write letters of recommendation. To go from that to a more community-based model is a bit of a shock for some people, but club rugby didn't always used to be that. Now, I think that discounting our domestic competition is not necessarily the most intelligent decision in a few areas, but based on how good the level of play is, I can completely understand where they're coming from. Me personally, if I had all the money in the world, I would just turn right back around, give every club X amount of millions of dollars and say, here you go, let's get at it. But I don't have that kind of money.
You're also obviously you coach several age grades, provincial sides as well, but you're also the director of rugby at North Star Academy. Where does that fit in the development puzzle?
So I've been a youth rugby coach for about 13 years. And I've had the amazing honor of working through the Capilano Rugby Club to get my start there. And I've noticed over the years our numbers declining. Now, we were still winning, and as long as you're winning, well, then there's not a problem, right? But there is a problem because we were winning with less and less guys every year. Then I looked around the local high schools. Now, I volunteer coach at the high school I went to, Hansworth Secondary, Go Royals. And I've noticed even more kids wanting more out of rugby. Our systems that we currently have in place, just club rugby, 2 nights a week, a lot of kids want more than that, or some kids just don't want to do that. You've got high-level basketball, high-level soccer, high-level hockey, high-level baseball. And there's all these academies, and academy is a really gross word. It's a really, really, really disgusting word for all sorts of purposes. It ranks up there with elite. I have no time for that kind of stuff either. This is an academy in the sense that it's actually curriculum-based. So on the North Shore of Vancouver, you have West Vancouver and North Vancouver. You go Lions Bay all the way up to Deep Cove. Any kid at any high school, boy or girl, regardless of skill level, can elect to not take PE at their school, and they can come to my rugby class, and we do any number of things. And that's in a school's calendar year out here. So where does that fit into UBC? Well, the two are completely separate. There is absolutely zero link. I just happen to do one and do the other. Where does that fit into the overall scheme of development of rugby in this country? I'm not entirely certain yet, but I started with 9 kids, then I went to 12 kids, then I went right up to 32 this year. I've only been running it for 3 years. Is it the way forward? I don't know, man. I don't have a crystal ball, but to be completely frank with you, I got fed up with waiting around for things to improve. And I don't believe that we're in a position with rugby in this country where we can be waiting, sitting on our hands, watching things. Everybody's got an opinion, especially on game day. On Saturday, everybody has a really good idea as to how we're going to fix things, and what it's going to take. And then Sunday rolls around and a little bit foggier. Then Monday, everybody goes back to work. I just figured if I'm going to dedicate my life to this, and if I'm going to put myself out there and I'm going to really do the best I possibly can, then I can't afford to wait. I pissed a lot of people off, Brian, locally, provincially, nationally. I mean, North Star, we were these amazing boogeymen for a while. And it's myself and a couple of dads that pitched an idea to a school board to get more kids playing rugby. We'd run sevens tournaments in the past, but those seem to be dying off in our neck of the woods. I believe it's an important step because I'm not just teaching rugby either. I'm teaching the importance of being the best person you can be, being the best citizen of your sport you can be, being an adequate representative not only of your sport, but your community and your school at all times. And I've got kids out there that have never picked up a rugby ball, right down to kids. I mean, I've got 2 kids that came out of the London Wasps Academy and they moved to Canada. I've got another kid who's going to go back and play national age grade rugby for Wales. And you smatter those in with kids that are just picking a sport up. It's a really unique something. But for me, it is what rugby is at its very core, which truly is a sport for everybody. And if I can deliver a sport for everybody under the roof of human advancement, while at the same time the importance of education and accountability, well, then by basic human nature, I have no choice but to do that. I don't want to sit around and cast aspersions or wait for things to change. I'm not that kind of guy. If there's something that needs improving, you get after it.
You worked with the Seattle Seawolves in Major League Rugby over the last year. Basically, I mean, you had a fancy title, but basically you were in charge of player recruitment for the inaugural season. How personally satisfying was it to see, Phil Mack, Ray Barkwell, Cam Polson, etc., Nakai Penny, lifting that enormous shield after winning the title?
How rewarding was it, or how relieving was it?
A little of both. Maybe you just answered it right there.
Brian, I've been asked to do a job based on my knowledge and understanding of domestic rugby in the Pacific Northwest. And there were some people there that took a gamble on me. I was not very qualified in terms of professional sport experience, but one thing I am good at is I'm good at people. I understand people, and I do understand our game. I may not understand it on a technical level that a lot of international or national level coaches do, but I've got a firm enough grasp where, if you're not tackling, if you're not winning your own ball, and if you can't catch a ball, you're not going to make a team. And if you can sift through the hype and you can move beyond the perceived profile of an athlete, be it, their social media presence or a fun story, and you can actually get right down to the basics. Is this guy going to do a job? You go with that guy. How rewarding was it to see those guys win? It was immensely rewarding, Brian. It's a team sport. I was a part of that team. I hired the majority of those guys. There were some previous signees before I'd been signed on. And, I did all of them play? Some. Did all of them work out? I doubt it. Did they win? Absolutely. And that's what I got hired to do, was build a winning team. Personally, very gratifying. On a more realistic and human level, I'm incredibly proud of those guys, man. I mean, we lost our head coach beginning of the year. Phil Mack put his hand up, and Phil is, you talk about remarkable men. You get a guy like Phil in there. Well, Phil doesn't have an ego. Phil doesn't stick his chin up to catch the rain. Phil just does his job. And, having guys like that in there, having guys like Cam Polson in there, guys like Ray Barkwell, guys that some quite well personally, and others, as just as a face in a crowd. It was immensely rewarding. The most rewarding part of all of it was seeing those guys and the smiles on their faces at the very end lift up that enormous shield. My God, they've got to get something better. And struggle under the weight of that thing with a big old smile on their dial, just to see people reach their potential. Well, that's why I'm involved in rugby. It's what I do. I really, really enjoy that process.
They really do have to rethink that if a guy like Cam Polson can't even live that as himself. Obviously, Toronto's entering Major League Rugby in this coming season. You were named in a press release of sorts almost a year ago as part of Carl Harrison's Vancouver bid. Now, we really haven't heard anything since. Where does that stand right now? Is that still alive at all?
Oh, yeah, very much so. I mean, we'd invested in Seattle Seawolves in the first season. We put together and contracted that team. That insider's view of MLR, it gave us the opportunity of preparing ourselves to better create a Vancouver franchise. And, we're still looking at that 2020 season. It's not about rushing in, though, Brian. It's about getting it right. So, what we do succeeds and best serves our rugby community and fans in Vancouver and in BC, and in Canada. I mean, to have parallel teams on either side, I mean, that's such a marketable rivalry. We were the first Canadians into MLR with our Seattle involvement. We're not wallflowers. We're serious and we're still taking a serious look at it. There were other competing bids. There was some really nasty stuff going on. And my entire thing is I don't really give a shit who delivers it, Brian. I don't. It just needs to be here. And we put our hands up, said we'd do it. And a lot of people took that very, very personally. People that I'd worked with, people that I was working for at the time. There were some really, really, really nasty things said. Some very bizarre lobbying and stuff like that. And it reminds you of the age-old saying, you never underestimate rugby's ability to get in the way of rugby. Because, I mean, if anybody's going to ruin things for rugby, it's people involved in it. And, that has since cooled. I've not heard of any other potential bids, but hey, if you're listening and you want to help shoulder the cost, I'm your guy. This costs a lot of money, and I'd much rather do this with a bunch of people than myself and a couple other dudes, because having seen the amount of work that went into MLR season 1 and the returns therein, this is a slog.
Yeah, it's certainly a long-term commitment rather than a short one. Vancouver certainly seems to be a preferred destination. Obviously, you mentioned that rivalry, particularly with Seattle. Toronto's going to have, New York, Boston, et cetera, over there. So it seems like it's inevitable that a professional team is going to be coming to Vancouver. Do you think we will see one in the next, within 3 years, so to speak?
Brian, you ever watched a sporting event in Vancouver?
I have actually.
Okay, what was your take on it?
Canada Sevens is a fantastic event. Right.
So you got the Canada Sevens, a 2-day tournament in which, everybody shows up and they really, really enjoy themselves. Do you think that's sustainable over a season? That level of engagement?
I would like to think at least partially.
Sure. I mean, simply put, call up Arthur Griffiths from the Vancouver Grizzlies. I'm sure he's got plenty to say on it as well. Vancouver is a difficult area to get bums in seats. Vancouver is. There are many places in British Columbia that you would more than likely sell games out. There's a lot of things that go into that. There's a lot of things that look into those venues. There's a lot of things that you have to take into account before you even suggest moving it beyond. But, you've got all the teams with the team names. You've got the Seattle Seawolves. Well, those guys don't play in Seattle necessarily. So how you make that work and where that comes from is that's one of the biggest hurdles you can face. Is it an inevitability? God, I hope so, man. I really hope that professional rugby in Vancouver is inevitable. I'm in a position right now where through high school, through youth club, through provincial age grade, through university, I am developing reams of athletes, and I want to send them somewhere. I want them to go on, and I want them to play rugby at their highest level. And if their highest level is MLR, sweet. If their highest level is men's Premiership Club rugby, awesome, great. We've got a number of guys that will go on to play professional rugby in Europe. Some of them have already been contacted upon graduation of this season. If I can get those guys going there, and then the guys in behind, instead of moving sideways from university, even a step up, like if I were a guy in the MLR and I knew my history and I was short on second rows, front rows, 9s, 10s, and 12s, I would be calling Curry Hitchborn ASAP. I've got a bunch of guys with nowhere to go.
Well, that's pretty comprehensive, and I've taken up a lot of your time already, and you've given us some great answers. I got to give you a couple softballs before you go, though.
Sure,
Souter, Lesage, Sandover, Best Dollar, these guys are all backs. Who's the next UBC forward to play for Canada?
Our current Type 5. I firmly believe that our current Type 5, with a couple others, will certainly play at least Canada A. Of that, I would give, I'm going to say 3. If they continue playing, if they're kept engaged, I can see them playing for it. We've had some very, very excellent athletes come through that are actually, Chris Taylor, Canada or Ireland U20 prop, current forwards coach out of the UBC Old Boy Ravens. He's the best tight head prop I've ever worked with in my entire life, and he qualifies for Canada. He's chosen not to play, but he would be an easy mark. I'd like to see Nakai Penny get a sniff at a higher level. I think he's more than capable. And then you look at Clint Lemkus, prime example. Clint Lemkus is a year or a bit out of eligibility. I can see him coming. Now, do we develop him? No. That guy came ready-made. There are guys in there that have played Canada U18, Canada U19, Canada U20, guys like Michael Smith, Callie Martinez, Liam Dahl, Owen Rattan, Connor Sampson, Isaac Kelly. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. I know in the next 5 or 6 years, we're going to see these guys become mainstays in something that's not just club rugby, but above and beyond, representing their clubs and their school, their alma mater at a higher level. There's no doubt in my mind. Let's not take anything away from Ben Lesage, Andrew Coe, Jordan Sandover-Best, or Ted. Those guys are freaks. I mean, those guys they're absolute freaks. Jordan Sandover-Best is one of the best 9s in the country. Andrew Coe is either-handed as a spider and capable at 15s and 7s. Theo Sutter will not only make you miss, but he'll cut you in half. And Ben Lesage, the guy's like a Swiss watch. I mean, he's, you're reminded of the Bum Phillips, one of my favorite NFL coaches. Bum did the New Orleans Saints. He actually coined the Who Dat saying. Wade Phillips is a boy. Anyway, he says the only discipline that lasts the longest is self-discipline, and Ben is the very epitome of self-discipline and life balance. He is a remarkable, remarkable man, and it's very hard to compare anybody to any one of those guys, let alone guys that play in different positions. I'm just making certain that the guys we do have coming through in those areas are adaptive and up to date, and more than anything else, fit and not prone to injury. That is the biggest part. You asked previously, why is UBC so much different? I mean, these guys, we only train 2 days a week. They're in the gym 3 days a week. They get their physio looked after. They get nutrition information. They get, mental health help as well. We want to make sure that these athletes are supported in the best way they possibly can. So when it comes time to represent their country, they're in a position to do so, not just, as a 15, 20-minute guy over the course of 5 games, but a consistent starter and contributor to their sport and their country. So are there forwards coming through? Absolutely. Just need a little bit more time, Brian. I'm doing the best I can with what I've got.
It certainly sounds like, all right, last one. So
sure.
Age grade, university, whatever level, all these players that you've coached along the way, if you had to pick one of these players to be on Jeopardy, who would it be?
Ooh, wow. I'm going to go a kid named Ben Stuthers, who I had the pleasure of coaching regionally, in club, and done some clinics for while he was in high school. He's currently one of our trainers and still suits up for us. He plays on our 3rd division team. And Ben is the smartest man I know. It doesn't even make sense. He's like a human calculator. Very well read, very, very intelligent, very well spoken, and completely and totally switched on. So the guy I'd want to see on Jeopardy, Dr. Bennett Stuthers.
All right, maybe a future Canada analyst or something like that. All right, thanks again for joining us. Really appreciate your time, Curry. Congrats again on your victories on and off the field, and we look forward to following the continuing chronicles of your rugby adventure.
Well, thanks, Brian. And just, on behalf of us at UBC, and, I think I can speak for a lot of people within rugby here in North America, I really appreciate the job you do. Your reporting is comprehensive, well-informed, highly considered, and always without rancor. There's never a bias anywhere. It's just the facts. And, facts are dry, and you're kind of dry yourself, so how you make it so entertaining is beyond me. So thanks so much, Brian. I really enjoyed being on here, buddy, and we'll chat soon.
I'll take that as a compliment.
You bet, bud. Take care.
Curry Hitchborn, head coach of the UBC Thunderbirds and a man of many rugby hats. You can find him at Twitter on at Curry Hitchborn. Pretty easy to find. Go ahead and check out his wedding photo, if nothing else. It's pretty much the greatest thing ever. That's it for this week. We've talked about a lot. We've talked about enough. I'm getting out of here. I'm Brian Ray. Thanks for listening, and enjoy your rugby weekend. Lots of sevens in the go, and maybe a little Major League Rugby. New York versus Boston, first time ever, is streaming live. Check it out. See you later.